Okay, so now we are moving on to the arm. So we're going to be creating joints for the arm. So our character currently is in kind of a cross between a T pose and an A pose. The T pose is just the arms are literally straight across, like the letter T, and an A pose, the arms are a little bit further down in the position of a letter A. These days, A pose is the preferred pose for most modelers to model their characters simply because of edge flow and then deformations once the character is rigged. It just gets better. Now it's easier to rig the arm if it's in D pose. So we have a kind of a cross between, and so it's a little bit harder to rig, but let's get started. So first off, we need to create a clavicle joint. So clavicle joints are super important. The clavicle bone that humans have is actually really important because it allows us to have full movement of our arms, so we can move our arms completely up. Without a clavicle joint on your model, you're going to get something that looks kind of like spaghetti arms when your character bends their arm at the shoulder. It's not cute, so we don't want that. So first thing I'm going to do is place this roughly where I think the clavicle should be, and then there we go. And then I'm going to go to front view. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to select the joint I just created, or there we go. And I'm going to move it over. Try to. Bit of a delay right now. I'm then going to go back to perspective view and kind of take a look at where it is. I'm going to move it forward just a bit. All right, there we go. So we're moving it forward. And I apologize for this delay. The computer is acting up. All right, so here is our clavicle joint. So to create our shoulder, elbow, and wrist joints, and create joints that are centered firmly within the model, we're actually going to use a combination of steps. We are first off going to go into edge mode, and I'm going to double click on these front edges here, double click on these back edges here, hit Q, and then I'm going to go to deform cluster. So that made a cluster, and as you can see, that cluster is smack dab in the middle of our shoulder, which is great. That's where we want our joint to be. I am then going to select my character again and double click on the subdivision around where the elbow is positioned and go to deform cluster again. And lastly, I'm going to select my model, and I'm going to go to where the wrist is and double click on that subdivision. As you can see, it goes all the way around. And I'm going to go to deform cluster one last time. All right, so the cool thing about this is now that we have these clusters, when we make our new joints, we can just snap them to the clusters. So I'm going to put my character into template mode. I'm going to go to my create joint tool, which is on my shelf. And I'm going to press V to snap my new joints to their respective clusters. So I'm just pressing V. So I'm going to the create joint tool, pressing V on my keyboard, and then pressing enter. All right. So now that we have created our joints, let's show all three of our joints. In fact, let me move this joint down right here. There we go. All right, so I'm going to select all of these joints, and I'm going to show their local rotation axes. All right, so we can see they are not pointing the way we need them to point. So I'm going to use what I used before with the legs, which is an aim constraint to aim the joints towards the joint that will be coming after them, towards their child. So I'm going to create a locator. So you can do create locator. I also have it on my shelf. And I am then going to press V to snap it to the joint that I want to put the aim constraint on. Now let's see if we can't select this. Having some issues. When you have issues like this, sometimes it's easier just to select things in the outliner. As you can see, my computer is really delayed right now, so I do apologize for that. All right, so we are now going to make sure that we have no values on our joint orient here. We don't. And we're going to go into the aim constraint window. And I've already set my settings, but I want to point a couple things out. First off, my aim vector, it changes depending on where the locator is. So right now, I want to rotate this, I believe, in the x-axis, or the aim vectors in the x-axis, and so all the rest are 0. Make sure your up vectors are all 0. I forgot to do that earlier, and I was like, what's going on? Oh, I need to make my up vector all 0. World up type is object up, and world up object is locator 1, and then we're going to hit apply. Oh, well, before we hit apply, we actually have to select both of our joints. So let's just do it over here in the outliner, and then we're going to hit apply. And now you can see that our joint 1 is actually pointing directly at our shoulder joint, which is exactly what we want. This is great. So I'm going to delete that aim constraint. We no longer need it anymore. And now what we need to do is transfer the rotate values down to our joint orient values. So I'm just Control X to cut, type in 0, and Control V to paste. Control X is the keyboard shortcut to cut, and Control V is the keyboard shortcut to paste. All right, so now we've got that one fixed, and we're just going to repeat these steps. So I'm going to grab my locator, and I'm going to press V and snap it to the next offending joint and move it out. Then I'm going to select, I'm going to select my joint 3, shift select joint 2, and apply my, oopsie, guess I selected them wrong. Joint 3 and then joint 2, which is where I want the aim constraint on. There we go. I selected them in the wrong order. And as you can see, my x-axis is pointing directly to my elbow joint. So now we can delete the aim constraint. And we can transfer the rotate values, Control X, type in 0, Control V, enter. Control X to cut, type in 0, Control V, and enter to paste. Control X, type in 0, Control V to paste. All right, great. Let's take a look at this. There we go. Sometimes you have to uncheck segment scale compensate. This is a new thing in Maya. I never had to uncheck it before. All right, so the next joint is going to be our elbow joint. So press V and move this out. So press V to snap, move it out. And then we are going to select our wrist joint and then our elbow joint and apply. And as you can see, our elbow joint is pointing perfectly to our wrist joint, which is fantastic. All right, so we can get rid of that aim constraint, and that's it for the aim constraints right now. We just need to transfer these values on my joint 3, so Control X to cut, type in 0, Control V, Control X to cut, type in 0, Control V, Control X to cut, type in 0, Control V. All right. And if you need to, undo the segment. All right, so now what we can do is we can get rid of our clusters. We don't need them anymore. And hopefully now I can select my joints. Very strange. Let's go over here. There we go. For some reason I was in component mode. It's like, no wonder I can't select them. And so we always select our child first, then our parent, and P to parent. All right. I also need to name these. So this one's going to be BN, B as in boy, N as in Nancy, underscore L underscore clavicle 01. Let me make clavicle a capital C. Next one will be BN underscore L underscore shoulder 01. And then BN underscore L underscore elbow 01. And then BN, it's not an end joint, there will be fingers attached, underscore L underscore, I'm going to call this arm 01. I'm going to call it arm instead of wrist because, because that's where, for my IK handle, my main control is going to be. Actually, you know, I'm going to call it wrist. And the reason I'm going to call it wrist is I'm going to be creating two versions of this for you guys. I'm going to go through how to make an IK arm, and then I'll do a total separate video on how, if you want to, you could do an FK arm instead. So why don't we just call this wrist for now? All right, and we are going to save. All right, so we now have our arm, and let's hit hierarchy and LRA. We no longer need to see our local rotation axes here. We do need to parent this. So I'm actually going to parent this to my mid, kind of my BN SPC joint. So I'm going to hit P, so it's going to be parented here. Okay. And the next thing that I need to do is I need to create some finger joints. So let's bring the model back so we can see what's happening. All right, so let's take a look at this. There we go. So we are going to need to do something similar to what we did with the arm joints, whereas we're going to be making some clusters so we can position our joints properly. I guess we don't actually have to, but in order to get these positioned more or less the way they need to, it's kind of what I want to do. Well, there's several different ways we can do that. Let's try a slightly, possibly easier way. Let's do it this way. I'm going to put this into template mode, and I'm just going to create some joints, and I'm going to start at the knuckle, and then I'm going to, let's see this for a second. Okay. And we'll do at other knuckles, so all the knuckles, and then the end. All right. Now these are really big joints. So to make joints smaller, you can go over here in the channels box to your radius and do like 0.2, way smaller. I have all of them selected. Now the problem with this is these joints are not where they should be, which is in the middle of this hand. All right. And then there's a couple other things. So this is a good way to see the pros and cons of creating joints different ways. So we are going to go here, and looks like we're going to be rotating this in the Z, joint orienting it in the Z. Okay. And then the next thing is this actually needs a bit of a bend to it. So I'm going to hit W and then D. And that's going to allow that to go up a bit. And I think we want to do the same to this one. All right. Then we're going to go into perspective view and select the end joint and press V, and then just position it at the end of the tip of the finger. All right, so now that that is done, we need to take a look at our local rotation axes of all of these, because I believe they need to be fixed a bit. actually not that bad. I think the end joint will need a little RJT rub. But overall, everything is it's mostly okay. I think we want to maybe, yeah, get that going down just a bit. And I think this needs to, we need to have it pointing just a little bit more towards the previous joint, and this one perhaps up a bit. There we go. So, and now I'm just reparenting. There we go. So everything's reparented, it's fairly straight. Let's see how it rotates. So how can we experiment with rotation here? Well, if we select hierarchy, let's see. Okay, this is good because it's rotating in the Z, which is what I want. All right, let's turn off our LRAs. And what I'm just going to be doing is, well, first off, I'm going to name these. So this is going to be BN underscore, so this is my index finger, yeah. BN underscore L underscore index A. 1. And this is going to be index B, index C, and then we're going to copy this because this is actually going to be the end joint. So it's BE. We can name it B if you find it easier, just to make sure you don't confuse things. We can always call it BE and have this the end joint. All right, so next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to duplicate this, move it over. We are going to have to reposition this a little bit because it's not perfect, right? So let's go to top view first. And we are going to have to move it out a bit, move it like that, move it like this. Go to our attribute editor and move it over a bit. And remember, I'm control middle mouse clicking. All right, so that's positioned pretty well. We do need to snap this guy to the end joint. So let's do that. And all the rest, let's make sure they're at all the knuckles. So let's go back to top view here. It's not. So what I can do is I can hit D. Remember, D is in dog. And reposition this so it's at the knuckles. And this one is a little bit more forward. And let's take a look at that. Looks all right. So we need to rename this. So I'm going to go to modify, search, and replace names. And we're actually going to search for underscore index and replace with underscore mid and hit replace. And as you can see, now all of these have been renamed, which is great. Yay. All right. Now I'm going to take the index finger and duplicate it again, like this over here. Let's see. All right, let's go to the top view and move it. See? Move it up. Try to move it up. All right, let's go to attribute editor here and move this accordingly. Select this guy and hit D. There we go. And then we're going to hit this guy. Press D as in dog to move it. And then this end joint, We're going to press V as in Victor. Just move that in. All right, so let's rename this. This is going to be our ring finger. So we're going to modify, search, and replace names. And we're going to search for mid, underscore mid, and replace with underscore ring. And replace it. Change the 2 to a 1. Let's save. And then let's save it as, oopsie. I don't want to open a scene, I want to save the scene. Let's save the scene as version 2. All right, so we're going to duplicate this guy, move it over, go to top view, make sure it's right there. All right, so we need to do like this. And hit Control Shift, right mouse press. You can move things in object world, object. So, right. And let's take a look at this. We're going to press V and move it over. All right, we also need to rotate this down a bit. Actually, let's move it down a bit. Yeah. And then we're going to have to reposition this. All right, much better. This one over here, I think, needs to be moved down a bit too. Okay, so we have almost all of our joints except for our thumb joint. I am going to stop this video, and in the next video, we'll finish up the hands and start making controls.